Welcome to On the Line. I'm Christine Williams. Coming up for discussion on our Viewpoints panel, the Belinda Stronach affair. Later on, we'll be looking at hate crimes locally. Stay tuned. And here are the issues to be presented today to our Viewpoints panel. On the heels of the Belinda Stronach affair, pardon the pun, comes the remark, attitudes about adultery have changed. A leading German opera house canceled a performance due to security fears stirred by a scene depicting the severed head of Muhammad. And a Liberal senator has proclaimed Canada is not interested in Africa because the cause isn't, quote, sexy enough. Later on, we'll be looking at hate crimes and we'll be profiling the Halton region. But first, let's meet our Viewpoints panelists. Farzana Hassan Shahid is president of the Muslim Canadian Congress, and Dr. Anthony Hutchinson is executive director of the Brampton Resource Centre. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Now, before we begin talking about the Belinda Stronach affair, let's hold up this picture for our viewers to have a look at. Here it says, Stronach, the other woman. Now, that is actually a quote because that quote has reached the courtroom. Now, we know what's going on here with this, with the hockey player and so on, and the wife has written her off as the other woman. Now, I'm going to start with you, Farzana. It's an event. Some are saying we're making too much of it. She's a politician, big deal. Others are saying, wait a minute here, this woman's a role model. And still you hear the component, affairs, they've become commonplace. What's your view on this?
Well, I mean, you know, I think it is being publicized a bit more, but it's because both of them are stars, aren't they? I mean, she's a well-known politician, you know, blonde and beautiful and moneyed and all of that. So, you know, everything is sort of glamorized around her. So, yes, I mean, I think a lot is being made out of this. On the other hand, I also think that attitudes on adultery have changed, and Belinda herself and her disdain for people and the way she's treated, for instance, Peter MacKay even.
That's right, the day she crossed the floor.
That's right, and literally just dumped him. I think, you know, it is symptomatic of what is happening in society in general. And I think that's very unfortunate because, you know, just because something has become commonplace doesn't mean that it should be accepted. What about child abuse? What about wife battery and things like that? Just because they're becoming more rampant, or incest, for example, doesn't mean that society gets to a point where it starts accepting just about anything. And where are our values, really?
Dr. Hutchinson, what's your view on this?
Well, you know, when you take into consideration that there's, you know, tens of millions of children dying of AIDS in Africa every day, and what makes the front page news is, you know, an affair between, you know, Ty Domi and Belinda Stronach. You know, and we basically say, well, what are we missing? A Jennifer Aniston, Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie kind of story in Canada? Are we trying to mimic that? Is that what we're making as our priorities? So. But in terms of, you know, adultery becoming in vogue or what have you, I mean, even the U.S. president, you know, he had his liaison with Monica Lewinsky, and that, you know, became front page news over even U.S. policy. So I think we have these mixed messages. I think there's in terms of the personal being political, if you will, there's one quote that Belinda said, you know, I'd like to keep my personal life private, but when you are in the public forum,
that's the big question, can you? Now, it's interesting what you said, Farzana, about her behavior being deplorable, the way she's treated these men. Now, ironically, I saw another article, and this was a commentary, that there are also women that applaud her, that say, well, her cool attitude toward men is something to be commended. And I have a problem with this, to be honest with you, because when you say that, what you're setting up here is a behavior that you're applauding. If women want to make a mark for themselves, this is the way to do it.
Yeah, well, I want to clarify actually something that I said earlier. I'm not equating adultery with criminal activities such as wife battery or child abuse. I'm not doing that. However, you know, for society to develop this acceptance for adultery, I think is very disconcerting because, you know, and my aversion to adultery is not rooted in my religious beliefs. I mean, my religious beliefs aside, I think secular values that emphasize loyalty and devotion and love and honesty in a relationship, that is what I'm basing it on. And I think it's very unfortunate that, you know, she would display those kinds of behaviors and attitudes in her conduct. I mean, she is a representative of the people. And although her private life is separate from her public life, and as long as it doesn't have a connection to it, I'm sure, you know, a lot of people would say that let's ignore it. But at the same time, you know, what is the message we are sending to our youth also?
Now, Dr. Hutchinson, you're nodding there. Anything to add to this?
I mean, we do have a higher level of accountability when we enter the pseudo-public life or the blatantly public life. And, you know, as we champion, let's say, rights for women, and we want, you know, then to get these mixed messages by saying, well, it's okay to go out and have these liaisons and what have you, and you're in that position. I think it sends mixed messages when we're trying to give, like, safe sex messages to youth, you know, in our society, and we have, you know, issues around, you know, teen pregnancies and what have you. So I think there is a standard of accountability that our political leaders, if you will, need to respect and uphold to some degree.
Now, the two of you, I'd like to hear your viewpoint on a quote that was given in this article. Elizabeth Abbott, she is called an expert in the cultural history of affairs. She says the shift has meant that as affairs have become more commonplace, everyone seems to know of a couple that's gone through a divorce. She goes on to say, this is why we feel somewhat queasy about the allegations in the newspapers, radio and television reports about this alleged affair. Now, she's saying she's speaking on behalf of the majority out there. We feel queasy because it's become commonplace, and here it is splattered across the front page everywhere. But on the other hand, I'm seeing from other articles that people are queasy not because it's being made an issue of, but because of what's happening here. Now, I want to know what your view is on this.
You know, she's an expert, and she thinks that, you know, she has all the expert information on this. I really wouldn't be able to say much on this issue at all, you know, as far as people feeling queasy about this. I mean, you know, I'm sure there are segments of populations that will feel queasy about it, and others who will just take it in their stride. So I don't think that there would be a uniform response as far as this is concerned.
Well, so, you know, I mean, adultery's been around for years. You know, it's interesting in school, the two things they don't really teach you is how to have a successful marriage or how to balance your bank account. Yet these are, it would seem that these are
crucial issues
in our society. And I guess what I would focus on is that how is it, like, again, that we have major issues in the world going on, yet, you know, an affair reaches the front page news. But you're right. I mean, divorce rates are astronomically high. I guess it's about 60% now, and you have more of a chance of your marriage being unsuccessful versus successful. But again, public figures I believe have to stop sending mixed messages when they're at that level.
But as this woman said, everybody knows somebody who's been through a divorce. And you talk to people themselves who have been through a divorce, and they've both experienced the sufferings involved. Often this is minimized in society, and you look at the impact on the children. This is nothing in society that we should be taking lightly. These people need support. And here we have a flippant expression of a word called adultery, and it's described as being old-fashioned. And in our day and age, it does sound that way, but there are definitely implications here that go way beyond religion, as you put it, Farzana.
Yeah, I mean, the high incidence of adultery, I think, you know, is giving that is causing dysfunctionality in society. I mean, that's what I feel.
Yes. Well, we're going to go for a break now. The next topic up for discussion, well, a leading German opera house, they've canceled a performance because in that performance is a depiction of the severed head of Muhammad. Stay tuned, we'll be talking about it. Welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line. I'm Christine Williams. The next article that we're discussing here, well, a leading German opera house actually canceled a performance because there was a depiction of it, of the severed head of Muhammad. Now, in this article, there was also something against Christianity as well, because it wasn't only Muhammad's head. But the point of the matter is, and I'm going to start with you with this one, Farzana.
Yeah.
Do you think that it should have been canceled as a result of this, what's called artistic expression in the first place? That's the controversy here.
You know, I don't think it should have been canceled. They could have eliminated that one particular scene, but again, there will be people who will say, well, you know, the bottom line is that artistic expression has been compromised in this. So because that is the controversial part of the show, and that's the one that gets eliminated. So, you know, really we're really at the same point of, you know, compromising our artistic values. So I don't think it should have been canceled. And I also want to point out that, again, as you said, Islam is not the only religion that's being targeted, if you want to use that word. I mean, you know, there's the decapitated Jesus and Poseidon and Muhammad, along with another Buddha.
Yes,
right.
Buddha. It was Buddha.
Right. So it's not just Islam that's being targeted. But having said that, you know, sensitivities, I think, should be acknowledged, and that's, I think, one element of this debate that is being ignored in all of this. That, you know, artistic expression is fine, but it, you know, self-censorship, I think, matters because, you know, sensitivities and religious sensitivities in particular, I think, should be accommodated in this. Again, if there is a protest, it shouldn't be violent. It should be done in the same spirit, not people coming out on the streets and breaking buildings down and windows and what have you.
Dr. Hutchinson.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of weird things that occur in the name of artistic expression.
Yes.
You know, I mean, I was thinking back to an art school where some students they'd killed a cat in the name of artistic expression, and that became an uproar.
You know, you may be talking about there actually, and I'm going to piggyback on this for a moment here, because at the film festival a couple of years back, it might have even been last year, but as far as I remember, it was a couple of years back, there was the skinning of cats that were expressed, and this itself ended up being an upheaval. So there's always that argument: is it really an artistic expression, or is it just something obscene?
Yeah, and I think when we're looking at issues of religion, which are highly political issues.
And very dear to people.
Very dear, and I think there needs to be a sensitivity in whatever we do to whoever we are engaging with or representing. I'm not saying that, you know, artistic expression is something that shouldn't be explored, but I think just as societies, we do need to be sensitive to how other people are going to potentially react or feel.
I would like to make a distinction here. I think that artistic expression shouldn't be suppressed because of fear. It should be suppressed only because you yourself have put limits on it because of sensitivity, not because of fear. And I think in this particular case, it was suppressed because of fear.
It's interesting what you're saying.
Yeah,
yes.
Because, you know, we've had these countless incidents where Muslims have come out on the streets, and you know, let me not generalize. It's not all Muslims. I mean, I haven't come out on the street.
No, and you won't.
So, no, I won't. And I know that, you know, I represent a very large segment of the Muslim community, and especially within Canada. I mean, I think the response to all these incidents has been very, very tempered and subdued, and, you know, in the same spirit of intellectual discourse. So, you know, fear is not something that should suppress this. That is one thing I would say about this, and it's unfortunate that they've done it because of a threat.
Now, it's interesting because the leader of the Islamic Council in Germany said precisely what you said. He agreed that perhaps it was a good idea to not show this. He also agreed that it would be a great offense to Muslims. But here's what he says in a quote: "Nevertheless, of course, I think it is horrible that one has to be afraid." And once again, you see that emphasis. It gets to the point of violence. I want to mention a crucial point here too, though. It's a bit sensitive at this point too, because of what the Pope said about, well, giving reference to that historic document when it comes to the Muslim tradition.
Right.
And I think this coming on the heels of that, when people's emotions were already raw, it just accentuated things even further.
Well, when you look, I mean, you look at the case of the Satanic Verses when Solomon Rushdie had written that, and, you know, there was I think there was a real misrepresentation of how that was made manifest in the majority of the Muslim community. And what my concern when these things do happen is I don't see it as a majority of the Muslim community reacting negatively. I think it feeds into this anti-faith or anti-Muslim hysteria that exists in the world. And so, you know, I think any group, if you're going to have a minority of people who, if they're offended in some way, are going to maybe, you know, protest or what have you. I mean, I think about the Christian people when the Da Vinci Code was released. You know, we had, you know, that people were saying we don't want to go to the movie or boycott the movie or what have you.
Boycotts and verbal protests.
But yes, but I mean, but when you're looking at this particular case, you know, I think that they're blowing the proportions out. Maybe there is some violence that's coming out of it, but again, that's not what typifies members of the Muslim community. But it's what plays its way into the media. And then, you know, and they actually use this opera as this catalyst for sensationalism, if you will, right? So.
And to that, I would say thank you for clarifying that, because most of these people who are coming out on the streets are really, you know, illiterate people who actually don't even know what they're protesting about, really. I mean, some of them have even been given money to do this. I mean, we've had reports of this actually happening, that, you know, these guys are just there because, you know, they want to promote a certain agenda. And so, you know, a lot of them don't even know what the religious significance of such and such a thing is, really.
And I think that stems, I mean, even some anti-globalization people, you know, I've seen people who go out and protest globalization, and when they've been interviewed about what they're protesting, they don't really even know. It's that you're just out there doing it. So it's not something that just impacts the Muslim community, it impacts the anti-globalization community, it impacts a lot of different types of communities, but I think it's what makes news.
What I find really interesting, and this may not elicit a discussion, we're going to have to go for a break anyway, but was the fact that this even happened. I mean, at one point you would see in the Christian faith that there was a lot of attack there, as you talked about with Rushdie.
You mean the opera got cancelled?
Yeah, no, I was amazed that that even happened, that it was even going to be depicting the severed head of Muhammad. Traditionally, this was something unheard of. And you would hear arguments in times gone by, well, is Christianity a safe target? But here you see the same thing happening against the Muslim tradition. So I found this an interesting occurrence at this stage.
Well, secular people will argue that, you know, this is actually, you know, suppressing them, and they're not being able to sort of say what they have to say, and, you know, this is part of their secular viewpoint. And
well, one of the severed heads was Jesus, and I mean, I think that would be as offensive to Christians as the severed head of Muhammad would be to Muslims, and as the severed head of Buddha would be to Buddhists. I think, you know, it's just what's done in good taste, and again, what's done in artistic expression. So.
That's right. Now we're going to have to go for another break. When we come back, well, a Liberal senator said, quote, it's just not sexy enough to send troops down to Africa as peacekeepers. Those were his words, which were indeed criticized. We'll be talking about that article after this break. Stay tuned. Hello again and welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line. Now take a look at this headline. It's our third topic up for discussion. Africa, it says, not sexy enough, says a Liberal senator. In the small writing there, it says, Liberal charges military no longer interested in peacekeeping. General says defense resources are tapped out. Wow. I'm going to start with you, Dr. Hutchinson. Think there's truth to that statement said by Liberal Senator Peter Stollery?
Yeah, I mean, when you're addressing the issue of war, it's a real issue of political will, and what are the political priorities for a government of the day. I think that in terms of what's going on, let's say versus Africa versus the Middle East. I mean, the Middle East is the bastion of oil. I mean, you know, it's, you know, we're partnering up with the United States in this quote war on terror. You know, one of the biggest struggles in Africa is the AIDS crisis that faces, you know, children and families and what have you. Romeo Dallaire basically feels that we should be more present in Congo and Sudan and Darfur and what have you, and you know, to fulfill our role as peacekeepers, right? But you know, we only have 4,000 soldiers, I think, in Canada, and so, well, I would say, well, where can we really make an impact, right? We don't have this, you know, almost close to 100 million soldiers or however many they have in the United States.
We don't have endless resources.
No, you know. So I think that in terms of, you know, you don't, well, I think in one point in the article they say that they're not saying that war is sexy, but they basically, in the other, they are saying that it is. I mean, it's what captures the political imagination of the
yes. Now what you're saying there, that Romeo Dallaire said, that's another senator, Liberal senator. He actually agreed that there should be, as you said, more people fighting or peacekeeping in these areas. But he took offense at the terminology that was used by Senator Peter Stollery. He agreed with him, but he said nothing is sexy in war. That's what he says. And he actually said that such scandalous language is actually an insult to people in uniform. Do you agree with this, Farzana? Or you go ahead if you have to finish on this. No,
I mean, look at all the war movies that have been hits, you know, Apocalypse Now, you know, Hamburger Hill, and you can go on and on. I mean, I think that basically war is a money-making machine. War. I mean, if you want to raise the price of oil, you know, you have a war. There are things that are sexy about war from a political vantage point, right? But what I think the comparison is, why not in Africa? Why are we not doing peacekeeping in Africa versus actually supporting this war in Iraq?
And this goes on and on too, because we look at Sudan years ago. Darfur has been an ongoing crisis. It's really endless from that point of view. Farzana, your views here?
Yeah, I don't think that war should ever be trivialized. And
do you think it was in this article?
I think it was. The terminology, yes. I mean, war is just one thing that should never be trivialized, because it causes death, destruction,
That's right.
innocent people, and who have really nothing to do with the political conflicts. Which is why it is so sad and unfortunate that it happens. And as far as Africa is concerned, I think the African people are being ignored all along.
You're talking historically here, not just in today's climate.
Today's climate as well. I think Darfur is one area, where we're witnessing perhaps a very massive humanitarian crisis.
Interestingly, they're saying it ranges from 40,000 to 400,000. I mean, how could you even make that jump in between? People don't have a clue, but they know it's an absolute disaster what's going on here.
And yes, NATO is in Afghanistan and Canada is part of NATO, but I think we're also playing second fiddle to the United States, and we're moving away from the peacekeeping role that Canada has performed up until now. I think we should come back to it and really assume more responsibility in regions such as Darfur, where really the humanitarian crisis is huge, it's enormous.
What do you think of what the other senator said, Dallaire, when he commented that decades of neglecting the Canadian military has really landed us in the position that we're in today?
Well, you need to make a clear delineation. Peacekeeping is usually done under a UN mandate, whereas I really see Canada's involvement in Afghanistan as being part of a Canadian military mandate, and let's say in partnership or support of NATO and or the United States. So it's almost as though what's going on with our soldiers in Afghanistan is part of our military trying to find its sense of its own, versus falling under that UN mandate. We know basically how the United States feels about the UN. So in terms of what is the political will supporting the involvement in Afghanistan, you're basically looking at the fact that it's Canada trying to get on the world map as a military power, if you will, albeit a somewhat limited one. But we do have to take into account that the soldiers who are there really believe in what they're doing, and they are representing Canada. Most of the soldiers who are there, the reports that I hear back from Afghanistan, are that they believe in what they're doing. They're there to represent Canada. But my point is that they would represent Canada at the UN, or they would represent Canada in Afghanistan. I think that there's wider political issues that we need to explore.
Lots of controversy. Lots of disagreement.
Is war sexy? Absolutely not.
Definitely not.
But it's been around for tens of thousands of years, and or thousands of years, and we'll have to just have another one.
Farzana, anything to add to this?
No, I mean, the Muslim Canadian Congress, for one, has been very sort of vocal about denouncing the atrocity in Darfur, and we've also stated that we want our Canadian troops out of Afghanistan. After we put an exit strategy in place, we can't get the troops out right now, but that's what we would like to see. And I think Canada's resources are, in my view, better used in Darfur rather than anywhere else right now. This is a humanitarian crisis. Let's not politicize everything. Let's leave political issues aside in this matter. I mean, there's close to 2 million people who are suffering on a daily basis.
Wow. Unthinkable, isn't it? Now, Farzana, before we close, because we're out of time, I want to congratulate you on your new role as president of the Muslim Canadian Congress. You took over from Tariq.
Actually, he was the communications director. No, I didn't take over from him. We have another communications director, and his name is Sohail Raza. He's the husband of well-known activist Raheel Raza. So he has taken over Tariq's role.
Raheel here on the line as well.
Yes, I know. So, but it's a big responsibility. I mean, I hope I can discharge it.
I'm sure you'll do it justice, Farzana. We're out of time. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
When we come back, we'll be getting into part 2 of our program. Hate crimes will be featuring the Halton region. Stay tuned.